Hey guys, it's Ben or BLG Strength, and today's video is about how to limit pain as a powerlifter. Powerlifting is one of those sports where it's very one-dimensional and it's based around the same plane of movement, which is sort of up and down, and that's across every lift. Now what this can cause is very repetitive movement patterns and a lot of wear and tear on the same muscles and the same joints. So there are three main things that you can do to mitigate some of these pains that you can accumulate as a powerlifter, which just comes with the training. You need to put in the time, you need to put in the volume over a training cycle, and what this does is it accumulates a lot of fatigue, which can lead to aches and pains, niggles, and further down the line this can become more acute injuries that bother people a lot more. So one easy way to mitigate this pain, so the first point really is that less is more. So powerlifting is revolved around mainly how much workload you can do, okay, and that comes down to sort of your main training variables, which is volume, frequency, and intensity. Now what I'd say is that to mitigate pain for a short term, you could easily just slash some of your volume and some of your frequency of the main lifts, just for a short period of time, just so that you can try and clear some of that accumulated fatigue. I guess what you could consider to be a deload, but it doesn't be as defined as that. So you could have a period of your training where you cut down a little bit of the volume. You know, just because you can trawl through 6 sets of 6 does not mean that it's going to be productive for you when you can get just as good a quality reps across 3 sets of 5, for example, at the same intensity and workload. So that's one thing to consider, is just simply not doing as much volume, and also not hitting the lift as often. So if you're squatting 3 times a week, you know, for a period of 2 to 3 weeks, you could cut that down to once or twice and substitute the other days with something like a leg press, a single leg variation, maybe a modified bar, so a different barbell in terms of variation, or do the movement but a lot lighter and really focus on control, tempo, stuff like that. Or you could switch it up entirely and do something different and train a different energy system. So higher repetitions, you could do some high intensity based kind of squatting where you take on you know, a smaller movement, so like a goblet squat for example, and do some rounds with it, so something more high intensity style. And that's just an example of how you could sort of change things up, and that should just clear some of the fatigue that you've built up from just barbell back squatting, or the similar, you know, pauses and stuff like that, and just change things up for you. Yeah, and if you're doing it once a week, you know, that's a great way to resensitize yourself to the movement. So things do become stale. That's why, you know, different training blocks contain different variations, and that's why periodization is a thing, because you're hitting up different areas of the lifts throughout the year. You know, you're doing a hypertrophy cycle, and then a more strength focused cycle, and then, you know, a peaking up to your competitions and stuff like that. But there's no reason as to why you can't stray from that if you're racking up injuries, aches, pains, niggles, and are training through pain. There's no reason as to why you should be doing that. So yeah, just consider manipulating those main variables and remembering that sometimes less is more, quality over quantity. That does hold true. You'd rather give 100% of your effort to a couple of sets than half-ass your way through loads of sets. So that's the first point. The second point for me would be really trying to nail those recovery variables. So I know everyone bangs on about that, and it's very cliche, like get your recovery in, but what actually is recovery? It's not foam rollers and massage guns and salt baths and stuff like that. That stuff is all a subsidiary to the basics, which is sleep, food, hydration. Those 3 are going to help you out more than anything. It's like a hierarchy. So you start at the bottom, you nail those basics, and then everything else is just a subset of that. So you make sure you're eating good quality food, feeding your body with good quality nutrients, trying to keep on top of getting enough protein in and stuff like that. That's going to be important for muscular recovery, and just in recovery in general in terms of performance as well, you know, fueling your body correctly for performance, lasting through those sessions, and just feeling better all round. staying hydrated enough so that you can recover from those sessions, so that you're not cramping up or anything like that, or feeling bad halfway through. That's not going to help you out in the long run, and those little things do add up. And then probably the most important one of those three is sleep. The amount of people that are relying on caffeine and other stuff to get them through, when in fact they could just be bumping up their sleep as much as possible to try and get in some more recovery. Then you won't have to make up for it through other methods. And that is going to be one of the most important ones, just trying to bump up your sleep. Just set a small goal, try and get a couple of hours of sleep more across a week and see how it affects your performance. This paired with that number one, where it's less is more, doing a couple of weeks of slightly lower intensity, lower frequency training, would be a massive test in how much you could see the difference, and how your aches and pains get limited during that time. So that's something to consider as well, just really nailing those basics and fundamentals of recovery. And then the third point is going to be trying out different planes of movement, and also making sure that you're getting a bit of variability within your training. I think that's so important. As I said, powerlifting is very one-dimensional. You're constantly just going up and down in a straight line. You're not doing any movement-based stuff. And if you've come from an athletic background, then you've probably found, or if you have clients that are from an athletic background and you work with people that are, that they actually face less aches and pains throughout their training than someone who just sticks to one sport, or is in a sport where it doesn't require any moving. They rack up a lot less aches and pains, and their recovery is better. And I think that's because they put themselves through a lot of different variations within their training, and they've been able to move through different movement patterns properly, and utilize muscles that we've probably never touched during the standard powerlifting training. And that's allowed them to sort of continue progressing whilst limiting their pain throughout their training. So things like utilizing the frontal plane and the transverse plane, so that's basically side to side and rotational. Those are going to be really useful for a powerlifter who barely ever strengthens those ranges of motion. So you can choose just, even if you include it in your warm-ups or at the end of your session, just 3 rounds of 3 exercises that cover those planes of movement, and just doing some reps on those. That combined with the first two, the really hammering your recovery and less is more, is going to be a massive difference in how your body is recovering, and also what you're doing to it to allow it to keep progressing. That's the main thing. It's not just a case of, can I survive this week? It's how you can set yourself up, set a base up to continue progressing from there. And that's where I think something like that variability in training is going to really come into play. So be proactive on it. Don't expect your coach to give it to you. Don't expect that someone's going to put it in a standard program, because it probably won't be. This is the kind of thing where you've got to go and look for some good movements that are going to suit you and help you, and that are within your boundaries and your mobility boundaries and stuff like that, and apply them to your training and see how they feel. If you don't find any benefit from them, or they don't really feel good, then don't do them. It's better than doing nothing. But try and find some of those different variations to include, and have fun with it as well. It's fun to include some different stuff within your training, because powerlifting by nature is quite repetitive. It's quite monotonous. Squat, bench, deadlift. That's it. And the variations of those, and some basic accessories that stay in for most people. But other than that, it's quite dull. I'm not saying that you should give up on powerlifting training or whatever, but including some other stuff is going to be great. So those 3 basics, I think, are an easy first step to mitigating some of the common aches and pains that powerlifters face. So a little bit less volume and frequency, less is more. Making sure that you've got your sleep, food, and hydration down to a T. Even if you try that for a couple of weeks, that's going to help massively. And lastly, including some movement variation within your training, and trying to move around different planes of motion than what you're used to. I hope that helps. That's something worth trying for 2 to 4 weeks and seeing the results you get from it. If you do get good results, please do give me some feedback. It'd be great to hear. It's something I've been trialing myself. I've been trying to apply some positive improvements in those areas. You're not going to be perfect in every single one. That's fine. But at least trying to apply some effort into those areas is going to help massively. So yeah, give that a go. Let me know if it helps, and thanks for watching.